Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Indy Investor Pod. We are Indy investors talking Indy investing, and we just want to give you as much information as we can just about Indianapolis real estate investing, all the things that are going on here in the city, any tips, tricks, anything to help you out. Hopefully this podcast can provide you with some insight and give you some local insight just from the local experts too that are doing things here in Indianapolis. So I'm going to be joined today with Dave Short and Sterling Davis, two of the top experts here in Indianapolis when it comes to real estate investing. And with that, let's get on with the show. All right, and welcome back to another episode of the Indy Investor Pod. I am very excited to have Dave and Sterling back with me again today. And fellas, I know today we are basically we're in December now, so we are wrapping up 2020 and looking to really what's going to happen in 2021. And other than kind of look at projections and neighborhoods and kind of things of what's going on, particularly in Indy, I would love to dig into kind of each of our businesses and hopefully with the different insights from the flipping side, the property management side, from the wholesale side, we can give the listeners a little insight into what you can be doing to kind of wrap up your 2020, make sure you are reviewing your goals, what you can do to be better, to improve yourselves, also looking at your team, your contractors, anybody you work with, and how do you plan for 2021? I know I'm excited about this because I haven't talked with you guys about this kind of topic before, just in a random conversation. So I'm excited to dig in with this. But before we do that, let's just how are you guys doing? So Sterling, how you doing, man?
Good, man. I can't complain. It's I'm blessed to be alive. You know what I mean? I think it's super awesome anytime that I get to hang out with you fellas. I feel like I always leave here wiser than when I came. So thanks for having us.
That's good. It's good.
Same with us. We've most of the people that know us around Syria and stuff, my wife and I battled COVID. We're through it. I can't say we're better off for it. I can just tell people, don't say, hey, I want to get it and get it out of the way. It's not that much fun.
Right.
Yeah. So, well, we are glad that you are healthy and back with us, Dave, and we're ready to go here. So when I always think about just, business planning and kind of hopefully everybody, that's listening to this is like, hey, it's December now. So either you have already planned for 2021 or, don't wait until January to get into that stuff. You should be planning your goals now, looking back at what maybe where you needed to improve in 2020, what you were doing right to, keep it going and keep it rolling for 2021 and really setting those goals for the next year and stuff. I also kind of think about just like this year was just a funky year in general of where we had, I know for us business-wise personally, we've had our worst quarter we've ever had in our business. We've also had our best quarter we've ever had in our business this year. So that's been super weird. Also with this year, it's hard to tell, were you good within your systems or was the market just super on fire that really just covered up any of the mistakes that you made there for a little bit? So you got to look at that. I also kind of had this conversation the other day of people that this individual came, of course, he just read Grant Cardone's book. So he's like, oh, I'm going to 10X my business and stuff like that. And I always look at, is your business ready to 10X? Like, is it healthy enough to do that? Or do you just need to do maybe a 1.5X or, a 2X or something like that? So I think that's something I'd love to, kind of dig in with you guys and see how you guys kind of talk about that and stuff too. So Dave, when you look at like 2021, as far as what you're doing with your flipping business or any of the other investments you have, you want to talk about and stuff, how do you evaluate that of knowing like, hey, I had a successful year. I'm okay with how it ended. I did whatever. So what do you do to go back and kind of review your year?
Well, I always spend a lot of December resetting and see what I think is going to be, go forward in our different economy. For me, resetting is, and I think it's typical of any entrepreneur, we all go through stages of burnout that we're trying to work. You're just tired. And so by the time December rolls around, I've got to figure out how to reset so I can re-energize for the following year. Now, my things, my reset is I go with what I think my weaknesses are. And then I go out in I used to read books to solve some of that, to help my reset. Well, now I think we can get so much more knowledge by just going with podcasts in the weakness areas that you have and get information from 3 or 4 different people in the same time that it would take to read a book. on it. And just like today, or this month, I'm really studying a guy by the name of Jay Abraham. And Jay is he's the master marketer in this country that everybody seeks out. I mean, to have a full day session with Jay Abraham, it costs $50,000, and he's booked out. He doesn't do seminars. If you want a Zoom call with him, it's $3,000 an hour on the marketing. So you can get on the web and get the same stuff from him for free. And, if corporations and businesses and marketing companies are willing to pay this guy this kind of money, then he's obviously got something to say. So, with attitude, I go to Tony Robbins for podcast. So between those two guys alone, you can get so much more high energy, detailed information to start thinking about how you can plug it into your business. So I don't forget, I want to tell everybody, Bigger Pockets had a seminar about 3 weeks ago, and I think you can get the replay now if you're a Bigger Pockets member. But it's called the Guidance in an Uncertain Economy, and it's it's an unbelievably good, positive take on what they see for the real estate business in 2021 and 2022. So it's certainly worth something that, I'll review it again. I listened to it, once already, but I'll still review it again because it is, it's very promising for what we're.
Nice. No, that's a great tip. And I just want to kind of go back to something you said too, of really just kind of when you're looking at your 2020 of like really just kind of digging into your businesses and like, oh man, if you feel like your marketing was down, if that was one of the areas that you needed to improve in 2020, of like, okay, how do you do that? Yeah, you're going to seek out, Jay Abraham, and you're going to look at his stuff and learn from that. If that's one of your areas that you need help in, like find those resources that you can do, connect with the people that can help you out and stuff like that. Same thing too, of like, oh man, I think everybody always needs that like attitude or leadership, those kind of things. So Tony Robbins is a great place to go for that as well. So Sterling, what do you do when you look back at like kind of your year, when you get this point, you're in December, you're looking back at like what you guys have accomplished, where your mistakes were, especially as a team leader, when you have people underneath you, you're like, oh man, we need to improve this. It's hard sometimes to, you always see these kind of glaring mistakes or your weaknesses and stuff like that too. But how do you look at the year as a whole and know what you do need to improve on, what was maybe just a fluke, it wasn't really a mistake? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right when you said the idea of like this year was a year of the best year of our life and the worst at the same time. So this was definitely a situation that we never faced before. In July, we leased out June, July, and August. We leased out over 100 homes, which is incredible, right? So then in November of this year, we had the lowest delinquency that we ever had before the 15th.
Wow.
We probably had 4 people delinquent out of, the 400 properties that we manage. And we were like, whoa, this is crazy. Like, what did we do different? And then December was probably, it's starting to look like probably one of the worst months of delinquency that we've ever had. So I think it's, as a basketball player and as a person that still coaches basketball, I always often talk about my players not to get too high on the highs and too low on the lows, right? Like it's kind of really looking at it in a framework that is realistic. For us, everything is mission driven. So at the end of the day, we're looking at not only as our KPIs, our key performance indicators, hitting our indicators, but as much as is it mission specific driven to our business? Like, is it obtaining what our mission is, and did we do a good job? And that's how we kind of look back at our year. Yes, we hit over 100 leases and did these things, but did we hit our mission to our full of enhancing the quality of our community? Was we focused on our key indicators to make sure that growth was actually obtained, not only by financial means, but just by just healthiness of the business. For us reflecting, man, it's humbling and at the same time, right? We added 150 doors overnight this year, right? But what we realized is those people weren't mission. They didn't buy into our mission. So you can grow to 150 doors with people that did not buy into our mission was almost as good as us adding the 2 or 4 doors of people specifically bought into what we want to accomplish. So for us, it was definitely, as we look back to this year, I think that is one thing that we are evaluating is how can we make sure that we stay on task, and stay on task meaning stay on our mission of enhancing the quality of our community. That is one thing that I felt like as COVID hit, we started getting nervous. And that comes from the head, right? Like we got nervous, so we started trying to do things outside of our realm, right? We start trying to just look on revenue and make sure revenue was getting generated instead of staying on our rail, which Dave always talks about, which is property management. So for us, I mean, a lot of things, the one thing that we're working on is trimming the fat. The things that we do that really don't make us money, the things that we're a property management company. That is the heart of it. So, we do acquisitions, we do wholesaling, we do all these, but at the end of the day, all that is distractions if we're not doing property management well.
Yeah. So no, I think those are all really good things to reflect on and like kind of just look back and kind of see where you were. And like you said, make sure it all revolves back into, does this fit our mission? Does this fit our core values? Are we all on pace? Is everybody on the team? Are they all rowing in the same direction? All that stuff is really important too. And one of the things I wanted to, I want to revisit that you pointed out of just the KPIs, going through the key performance indicators of knowing your numbers, knowing what you should be tracking, but then paying attention to those numbers and making sure you that you believe in your numbers and you follow your numbers too. So I know one of the things that we always do when we're looking at, within our KPIs and looking at our numbers is, so we have scorecards that we go through every week. Every department has a scorecard. We also have like our leadership team has a scorecard that we go by, and we color code ours to where like if there's something that if it's below our goal for the week, then we mark it red. If it's above our goal for the week, then it's in green. If it's in the range of our goal, then basically it's yellow. But we always like go back and look at those too. If it's red one week, I'm not going to freak out. I'm not going to fire people and change systems or anything like that. But if it's red 3 weeks in a row, that's when there's something wrong within here. What are we doing wrong? What do we need to fix? Same thing. If it's green 3 weeks in a row, it's one of those things of like, hey, are we doing something right? Is our numbers are too low? Do we need to make our goal higher? Those kind of things. Or like, hey, what are we doing well that we can kind of continue? We can replicate this in another area of the business and stuff. So, and I know within our 3 businesses, we're operating at a pretty high volume, and we've been doing this for a while. We have bigger teams. Let's kind of take this to a point of maybe somebody that's just starting off, or they're still fairly new. They've been in this to a couple of years. What are some of the things maybe that they can be doing to, kind of to look back at their year to see maybe that, they don't have a team, so they don't might have huge scorecards or anything like that. But I still go back to like, you still need to have some type of scorecard. Even if you're in a one-man show, are you putting out, how many offers do you want to put out a week? How many properties do you want to look at a week? Or maybe it's a month or anything like that. So I think it's always important to have some of those scorecards, those metrics you can always do, so you can go back at this time of year and you can evaluate how your year really was, and it truly was. So you guys think about that, like those people that are kind of in that spot of they're just getting started, or they're still fairly new to this, or they're almost they're seeing if they are ready to grow or anything. What's something that maybe you have that you would suggest to them to look back and that they can look back at this year? So Dave, do you have anything that you would recommend to them?
Well, I used to do, when I was a real estate sales trainer, manager of a company, we used to assign dollar values to tasks. And once we did that, then, if somebody wanted to make $1,000 a week and you were paying them $1,000 a week, it's your job as a manager to give them $1,000 worth of tasks that they need to do for a goal session. And where you get that is like the comment you mentioned earlier about somebody going to 10x their business, after they've read Grant Cardone's book and go through that and, just say, okay, buddy, here's the deal. How many did you do this year? So if you did 2 and now you have to 10x, so you have to do 20. So how many cold calls did you make a day? How many drives did you make a day? How many appointments did you have in a week? So let's assign values to this to get to a, if a 10x to you equates to $20,000 a month. So let's get enough tasks that you can do $20,000 a month. Are you capable of doing that? So, ours is kind of assigning tasks to get to the goal. And does that mean bring on more people so you can get that many? If you make in your business, if you make 100 cold calls, how many appointments you're going to get. If you just pick up and open the phone book and start calling, you're going to know with 100 calls. Well, that's a low value task. So if you want to make $1,000 a week, you have to make 1,000 cold calls. So if you want to make $2,000 a week, then you have to have 10 appointments at $100 and 1,000 cold calls to make $2,000. So you just start. We tell people, let's break it down to the simple and see if you're willing to give that kind of effort to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, and that's it. It's working it backwards too. I know if I want to get one deal, if I want to get one purchase agreement signed, then I need to be able to go on 4 walkthroughs. Well, for me to be able to go on 4 walkthroughs, I need to be able to basically generate 100 phone calls, like you said, or something like that. To be able to generate 100 phone calls, I have to send out 10,000 mailers, all those things. You just, working the numbers backwards and knowing those numbers. I really like that though, of like kind of assigning a dollar value to it, because that's really what, as you get into this, you realize like, hey, time is money. So basically those things, you're kind of like, hey, you need to be able to do this for an hour, or you need to be able to do this for a day or a month or a week or whatever. Having those dollar values assigned to those things does really equate, and it makes a lot of sense. So I like that a lot. So what's some advice that you have for somebody that's maybe in that position of they're ready to kind of maybe grow their business, or really they're in that startup phase still, that perseverance phase of a business? What's something they can do to kind of reevaluate that, their year or anything?
Yeah, I mean, not only do we talk about like our mission, but I think it's important to understand your why. I think as you look at your why and you reflect on your why, I think that can pull a lot out of you. I think what Dave said is a great idea. One of the things that one of the questions people always ask me is like, what would you do different? A transparent moment. One of the things we're working on right now inside of our business is we growth happen. Sometimes growth doesn't happen like we see it on TV, right? It doesn't happen where one day it just explodes and now you're a millionaire. For us, growth happened very incremental, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis. And, when we first started, we were only a property management company. Next thing I know, like we're now a real estate brokerage company. We're a property management company. We do wholesale deals. We're all these different arms of our business. And I'm like, how do we get here? So I think it's important to, as you are growing, is to make sure you have a good foundation. And so for us, like now, we've added all these different things. I'm sitting down with our lawyers and our accountants. They're like, okay, how do we uncross these streams? Where if beforehand, if you sat down with Jeff Jinks or Sarah Hotrip, we wouldn't have as much pain and agony that we're going through right now. So I think, when I start looking at it on a preventative measure, it's like making sure before, like I never thought we were going to ever hit $1 million. $1 million was 3 years ago. I never thought we'd hit $2 million. 2 million was, 2 years ago. I never thought we hit 3 billion. 3 billion was, this year, right? So for us, like it was like, it almost came, like people can tell you to prepare, but I always wanted to be here. Like this was always the goal. But what we did was we worked with vendors that was working at our level at that time. So we was working with accountants that we felt like was the most affordable at the time, that kind of could cater to us, where looking back, I wish that I worked with a Jeff Jinks or a Sarah Holtrip or somebody that was more advanced and maybe a little bit more pricey at the time, so that now that we grew, we didn't have some of these hiccups. So for me, like when I look back, and somebody that's just starting, that would be mine. It's like just making sure that you start right. Just start, with the person that's a little bit more expensive. It's going to be a better foundation.
Yeah. I think that's really important. I think it's something that a lot of, business owners, they go through that. And sometimes they struggle a lot with that, of even like, you kind of bring up that phase of like, hey, I know when I started up, I could only afford, this accountant, or I could only afford this person. And a lot of times you might outgrow that person. And that's a good thing. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. A lot of this happens too within business and with business partners. Sometimes like, hey, my vision is going to outgrow kind of my partner's vision. And how does that work? Do we separate or do we continue on? And those are all just open and honest conversations that you need to have, whether it's a business partner, but even with, when you're talking about vendors too. It's okay for you to outgrow a vendor if that's what your goal is, if that's what your why is, if that's on mission with you. And then just having this conversation like, hey, so we need to get something bigger. We need to go something bigger. So those are all a great part of like kind of reflecting back on what you did this year. Did you even outgrow your peer group? Or did you outgrow kind of your mastermind group or your coach? That happens a lot of times too, of like where, hey, I've worked with this coach for like 3 years. I think I need to switch it up. Yeah, you probably do. Like that's okay to switch up coaches, masterminds, and things like that. These are all great things to consider. So I want to get into a little bit of like 2021 now, of like kind of like, so looking forward, like I want to kind of just pick your guys' brains about how you guys come up with like setting realistic goals and realistic expectations for what we want to do in 2021. As we're going through our vision stuff, and we always do this of like, I have my leadership team come in, we have like vision, like a vision planning session to basically like where we, usually in the past, we've like kind of gone away for a couple of days and stuff. With COVID, we're not going to do that this year. So we're going to do like smaller sessions and things like that. So we're not stuck in a room all together at one time. But like when we're looking at it, it's like, hey, we need to set realistic expectations to go forward next year and really look at it. And I'm kind of in that boat of like, man, really looking at like, hey, what did we do this year that maybe we just got lucky because the market was so high? What do we do really well that is going to push us forth in 2021? So what are some of those things that you guys do for 2021 or looking forward to next year to, like I said, make sure your goals and expectations are realistic, they're attainable, and going from there? So Dave?
Well, I go back and look, typically the last 2 years to see where where I got my flip deals from. And so I try to break down is there one area that was a lot stronger last year than it was the year before? And is that going to shift? And now do I look at where I got it 2 years ago, depending on what kind of the economy is? I try to set realistic goals, knowing what I want to do. I know I'll have to spend an inordinate amount of time on my office building, the Cyria Center, getting it going. So that's going to take a big chunk of my time. And now how can I maximize my flipping income and create the labor over there that needs to get that done? So, I'll spend a lot of December trying to figure out what a balancing act is, for our flipping business, because that's still going to be the core of my business on it. So, mine becomes a balancing act in trying to allocate the time to get these things done. And, I've hired a coach in the co-working space and the event center space to help me with what I don't know, which is a lot. And and then I've got a gal that's going to implement that stuff, but I also know, what her weaknesses may be, and and I've got to, subsidize those. So do I have to do it, or we have to get somebody else to help her do it? So, but yeah, mine become, when you're planning the next year, it becomes a balancing act if there's something that's out of balance. My event center's out of balance because of my lack of knowledge in it. So I've got to get work on getting that balanced while I keep my flipping business, moving forward like we want to.
Yeah. And that's always the tough thing too, of like, I like you have this over here and it's like, I need to pay attention to this. I need to focus on this, but this is where I make my money. So I need to make sure this is ready to go and all that stuff too. So it is a balancing act. So what's something that you do to make sure, like when you're looking at 2021, going forward, that they can reach your goals and they're attainable and all those things?
Yeah. I think what Dave said is absolutely true. I kind of call it sometimes noise. Like, how can I lessen the noise? From the year past, like, for example, like for us, like, there were always goals and things that we wanted to accomplish, but there was so much noise that struggled to get to point A to point B. So how can I eliminate that, and what way do I do that? But also, I think what you mentioned is true too, is like having times where you can reflect with your team. And if you don't have a team, you have a team of people around you that can give you honest feedback. So, and I don't think that should come from one person or one type of person. When I was a single member person, I have people that wasn't even real estate that were my mentors. I had people that were in real estate that were my mentors. So it gave me a balancing act, the understanding of where my blind sides are. And I think you have to be honest where your blind spots are. For me, I was never a property manager. I came from an entrepreneur background. So my blinders are normally when I first started in areas of property management and landlording and things like that. So for me, I always knew I needed a strong team around me that can cover up some of those weaknesses that I may have. So I think, with looking at it, is making sure that you have a team that can give honest feedback. We working this week with our team, and they're doing their self-evaluations. And with their self-evaluations, they're pulling through and being able to tell us what their goals for Ethosty is for the next 2021. Because so many times as a leader, it sometimes feels like we're the talking head. Like, we're the guy, and I'm going to give the great Martin Luther King speech, and I'm going to rally the people, and I'm going to motivate these people. And I'm like, wait a minute, like, what? They're the ones in the day-to-day. They're the ones that are dealing with on the front lines. And so for me, not to be able to engage them and give them to give me direction, then I'm going to have a huge blind spot. So for us to really obtain those numbers, it can't just be one voice. It has to be a team voice that allows us to come with a comprehensive, numbers.
Yeah, and that's it too. Of like, if you are, if you're working within a team, and you're leading in a team, and they work under you, there's that thing too. But there's also your team of contractors and vendors and this type of things too. Of checking in with them, of having like, hey, if you did 3 flips last year and next year you want to do 20, and you're using one contractor, is your contractor going to have time for you to be able to do that? Do you need to source other contractors? Do you need all those types of things that are what needs to be considered? I know we go through, kind of an exercise when we set each and every one of our goals. This is when we're talking about yearly goals, quarterly goals, weekly goals, all this type of stuff. This comes back to kind of the teaching days. And I know a lot of the business people do this too, where they set SMART goals of what they're called. Basically that they are SMART being an acronym for basically specific, that the goal is
Measurable.
Specific. It's going through that it's a specific thing. It ties to one thing. Next, that M is that it's measurable. Can you measure it? Is there a number tied to it? Do you know when you're going to hit that number? And then the A is attainable. Can it actually be reached? Is it something that's just like super lofty, something crazy? No. Is it actually attainable? Kind of the same thing with R being realistic. Is it realistic? You can get things done within a certain amount of time. I think some people's goals, when they set them, maybe they're not realistic for them. That's okay to have unrealistic goals, but when you're setting, we're talking about these of specific goals that are measurable and things like that, make sure they are realistic. And the last thing that the T is that there's a time frame that when you're going to reach that. Hey, I want to reach it by this date, and then you also know hey, when we reach it, I know I'm going to reach it. My team's going to know we reached it because of this.
No, to that point, like before you move on, like I always tell this story about with my church, right? So my church came out with this goal, and they were like, we're going to have 100 baptisms in the year 2013. And we're like, yeah, we're going to get 100 baptisms. Mind you, it's only 100 people that go to my church. So what we're saying is we're going to double the size of our church, as well as with doubling the size of our church, we're going to also all be like new converts to the church. Like these, so, and then it was like probably about March it came around. And they're like, oh, yeah, well, we're still, and then they got one of those chalkboards, like where every baptism will like, color up to the line. I was like, all right, like, this is cool. Like, and my dad, he's a great, vision guy, like, and he's very excited. So, and this story is more about like why it's important to have all of the SMART goals and not just, a couple of them. So I started running the numbers on it, and I was like, well, if we look at the idea of how many more Sundays we have in church, and we look at how many, new members and new people that we need to come every Sunday for us to be able to obtain this goal, it was like 26 new people would have to come. And out of that 26 new people, 5 of those would have to get baptized every Sunday. And I was like, we only average 2 new people every Sunday at this point. And we were focused more on the baptism and trying to obtain that than focusing on obtaining new people to be able to end up getting baptized, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's, when you say SMART goals, it's so true, like in making sure that you focus on the right metric, because, at the end of the day, baptisms, yes, that's the thing that we want to get, but you have to dissect and say, I think you talked about it before, like how many conversions of those people, how many new people needs to walk through these doors for us to be even obtainable, because 100% of those people walk through the doors aren't going to necessarily get baptized or become a buyer or a seller. So I think, it's having all those metrics is so important, because then you're just going to have like a halfway empty glass, and the end of the year is like, man, maybe next year.
Yeah. I will say too, no, that's a really good story. It comes back to even just like looking at people's deals of like, I know it seems like every acquisition manager that you ever bring on, they're always like, right away, you get a lead in, they think that lead is going to be a deal every single, like, no, you need like, you need like 10 of these leads just to get, you disqualify the 9 to get to the 1 is basically what you needed to do and stuff. But I will say too, something, if you guys are looking at your goals and planning for next year and kind of looking at what you did in 2020, and this is always kind of held true for us, and you guys can kind of see what's going on in your businesses as, you guys are listening to this podcast and stuff. But I realized that, like, so for the last 3 years, when I really dug into our numbers, I realized for the last 3 years that we always came short in the fourth quarter of every year. Like, we just never hit our goals for fourth quarter every year. And really, it was because our goals were unrealistic for fourth quarter. What we always did is we just had a yearly goal, and then we just divided it by 4 and then said, oh, okay, this is our fourth quarter goal because this is 25% of our year. Well, looking at our year, that didn't make sense. Second and third quarter were always our best quarters. They should have higher goals than a fourth quarter or first quarter or whatever, whatever it looks like in your business. So I kind of just ran the numbers and made it realistic and realized that, like, generally our year generally comes from like 22% is in fourth quarter. And then like 25%, 26% was like second quarter. And then like third quarter was like 33%. And then like I realized that fourth quarter is 18%. Well, I said our goal for 18% of this year. Well, we hit our fourth quarter goal. Like, or we're going to hit our fourth quarter goal because it was realistic. It made sense for what's going on within our business and stuff. So those are all things to consider. And I know we're running a little short on time. Before we get out of here, Dave, do you have any last just comments, tips, or anything for anybody out there listening?
One of the things I've done over the years, I've taught a lot of goal setting sessions. And one of the things about goals, and we really didn't talk about it, they need to be in writing and they need to be signed off on. And I can give you an example, and it's a tremendous example, is that when we trained a group of real estate people, every Monday we met for a year, worked on goals, kept everybody accountable. Well, first of all 7 of these people were in the business for at least 10 years on it. So it gave them a good foundation of which they could work with. And one of the things that we asked them to do is write down their 5-year goals that they thought would be realistic for them to do it. And we asked them to have 20 of these. And I said, okay, put them in your desk and don't ever look at them again. And those people who were in the business in 5 years, we pulled out that goal sheet, and they had obtained, the average was 15 of those without ever looking at it again, just putting them down on paper. And it just really was a very cool exercise. It takes a long time to do it because it takes 5 years, but it was a very cool exercise that most of these goals were obtained by the people. And it had to do with cars, had to do with houses, had to do with other stuff. So just by putting in paper, putting it in your psychological aspect of your mind, then your mind starts working on it.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love that. And I 100% recommend that. If even if you're doing weekly goals or monthly goals or yearly goals or even 5-year goals, like Dave said, I do think they need to be written down. If they're in there for your team or anything like that, like they need to be put up somewhere where people can see them. Like even
they're just a dream if they're not written down.
Yep, that's right. So I like it. Well, thank you so much for joining me, gentlemen. It's been a great episode. Hopefully what we've given you guys today is something that you can kind of maybe learn from to reflect on your 2020 and give it into 2021 to get some goals out there, make sure they're attainable, make sure they're realistic, and that you can just shoot for the stars a little bit, but also kind of make sure that they make sense for you and what you want to do to be on mission with what you want to accomplish next year. So thanks a lot. And this is another episode for the Indy Investor Pod. Take care.